Now, let's look at their interactions with external authorities, specifically the astrologer. In Indian culture, an astrologer's guidance is often taken with immense seriousness, especially regarding marriage. For Sumit's family, this was a way to find a celestial justification for their disapproval. But for Jenny, the astrologer represented a terrifying wild card, an external power that could not be controlled by her narrative. Watch her demeanor in those scenes. When the astrologer delivered bad news, suggesting the family would never accept them or that their union was ill-fated, Jenny's reaction wasn't just disappointment. It was a form of validation for her martyrdom. She would turn to Sumit, her eyes wide with a kind of tragic vindication, as if to say, "See? The entire universe is against us. It's just you and me against the world, against your family, against the stars themselves. My sacrifice is even greater than you thought because I am defying fate itself for you." The bad news became another tool in her arsenal, another way to emphasize the monumental scale of her commitment and the isolation they shared. But when the astrologer offered a path forward, a compromise, or a suggestion that required action or adaptation from her, her attitude shifted. Suddenly, the celestial wisdom was questionable. She would become skeptical, dismissive. This is a classic tell of a manipulator. An external opinion is valid only so long as it supports their established narrative. When it challenges that narrative, for instance, by suggesting Jenny needs to adapt more to Indian culture or that Sumit needs to maintain a relationship with his parents, it is rejected. Her narrative is supreme. It cannot be altered by reason, by compromise, or even by the stars. The only truth that matters is the one that reinforces her status as the ultimate martyr and Sumit's status as the man who is eternally indebted to her. The long, agonizing saga of them getting married is perhaps the most compelling evidence of all. For years, the story was simple. Jenny wants to get married, and Sumit is a coward who keeps making excuses. We were all on Team Jenny. We wanted her to get the security and validation she deserved. But let's re-examine the pressure she applied. It was relentless, and it was almost entirely based on her sacrifice. "I can't stay in India without being married. My visa is about to expire again. I'm getting too old to keep waiting. I gave up my life to be with you, Sumit, and you won't even marry me." Each of these statements, while factually true, was a perfectly crafted guilt bomb. The marriage wasn't presented as a joyful union of two people, but as the bare minimum Sumit could do to begin to repay his debt to her. It was framed as a transaction. "I gave you my entire life, and in return you owe me this piece of paper so I don't get deported." She leveraged her precarious legal status and her age, two genuine vulnerabilities, into weapons of coercion. She created a ticking clock scenario where Sumit's failure to act would result in the ultimate catastrophe, her being forced to leave India. This would mean her entire sacrifice was for nothing, a public and humiliating failure. The unspoken threat was not just that she would leave, but that he would be left with the unbearable guilt of having destroyed her life for nothing. He wouldn't just be a man who broke up with his girlfriend. He would be the man who single-handedly rendered the defining act of her life meaningless. Faced with that level of emotional blackmail, is it any wonder he finally caved, marrying her in secret without telling his family? He wasn't acting out of courage or conviction. He was acting out of a desperate need to stop the constant, unbearable pressure and to placate the woman who held his conscience in a vice grip. Now that they are married, has the dynamic changed? Has her sacrifice been validated, the debt finally paid? Absolutely not. In fact, the manipulation has only escalated because the goalposts have moved. The marriage was never the finish line. It was just a way to legally and emotionally secure her position. Now, any attempt by Sumit to reclaim a shred of individuality is seen as a new betrayal. We saw this with crystal clarity when Sumit expressed a desire to go back to work and reclaim some of his social life. A healthy partner would say, "That's wonderful, honey. I'm so glad you're finding your passion again." What was Jenny's reaction? Panic, insecurity, and of course, a new variation on the old theme. "So you're just going to leave me alone all day? What am I supposed to do by myself? I came all the way to this country to be with you, not to sit in an apartment alone while you're out with your friends." The argument is breathtaking in its manipulative genius. She is reframing his perfectly normal desire for a career and a social life as an act of abandonment. He is not building a future for them. He is selfishly deserting her. Her sacrifice of leaving America is now being used to justify why he should sacrifice his own life outside of their relationship in India. She didn't just give up her country. She expects him to give up his in return, to exist only within the tiny bubble of their life together. This is the ultimate aim of martyrdom manipulation, not just to control a partner's actions, but to absorb their very identity, to make their world so small that it contains only one person, the martyr. To truly understand the psychological mechanics at play here, we need to introduce a few key concepts from our expert. The first is what's known as a victim mentality or victim identity. A person with a victim identity doesn't just experience hardship, they define themselves by it. Their suffering is not an event, it is the core of who they are. They subconsciously seek out situations that reinforce this identity because it is familiar and, in a twisted way, powerful. Being a victim absolves you of responsibility. It grants you moral authority. It elicits sympathy and care from others. Our expert suggests that Jenny exhibits all the hallmarks of a profound victim identity. She seems most animated, most engaged, when she is recounting her tale of woe. The story of her sacrifice is not just a story, it is her life's script, and she recites it with the passion of a seasoned actor. The drama it creates, the sympathy it generates from the audience, and most importantly, the guilt it generates in Sumit are the emotional currency she runs on. Without her victimhood, who is she? She's just a woman in a difficult relationship. But as the grand martyr of 90 Day Fiance, she is an icon, a tragic heroine. It's a role she plays to perfection. This bleeds into a more severe, though often misunderstood, psychological pattern: covert narcissism. We tend to think of narcissists as loud, arrogant, and grandiose. But there is a quieter, more insidious version. The covert narcissist gets their sense of importance not from bragging, but from being the most wronged person in the room. Their narcissism is fed by sympathy. They manipulate through guilt, playing the martyr to get their needs met. They are masters of the passive-aggressive and the guilt trip. They will do a huge favor for you that you didn't ask for and then hold it over your head for years. Does this sound familiar? Jenny performed the ultimate unsolicited favor. She blew up her life for a man who, at the time, was catfishing her and secretly married. And she has spent every day since ensuring he understands the magnitude of that favor. The covert narcissist's worldview is one of entitlement. Because I have suffered so much, I am entitled to your unwavering devotion, your complete attention, and the sacrifice of your own needs. It is a profoundly self-centered worldview, cleverly disguised in the selfless language of sacrifice. This dynamic creates what our expert calls a perfectly codependent system. It's a lock and key. Jenny's martyrdom manipulation is the key, but it would be useless without the lock: Sumit's specific psychological profile. As we've established, Sumit is a conflict-avoidant people-pleaser. But it's deeper than that. Why is he so susceptible? Because Jenny's helplessness and her constant need to be saved from her own sacrifice fulfills a deep-seated need in him. For a man who has consistently failed to stand up to his parents, who feels like a disappointment and a failure in the traditional Indian sense, saving Jenny gives him a sense of purpose and heroism. He may be a coward in his family's eyes, but in Jenny's, he is the knight in shining armor, the man for whom she gave up everything. He is the hero of her tragic story. This is an incredibly seductive role for a man with low self-esteem. He enables her victimhood because it makes him feel strong. He accepts the guilt she heaps upon him because it confirms his central importance in her life. In this twisted way, they both get what they need, but not what they want. Jenny gets control and a constant affirmation of her importance. Sumit gets a sense of purpose and avoids the terrifying prospect of having to build a life on his own terms and confront his family directly. They are locked in a trauma bond, a relationship defined not by love and growth, but by a shared cycle of crisis, guilt, and emotional rescue. As long as Sumit is busy managing Jenny's emotional state, placating her fears, and reassuring her that her sacrifice was worth it, he doesn't have to think about his own hollowed-out existence. He doesn't have to confront the fact that he has no career, that he is estranged from his family, and that his life has been completely consumed by the needs of another person. Her manipulation provides the perfect distraction from his own quiet desperation. This forces us to deconstruct the very idea that this is a love story. Is it love? Or is it the most complex hostage negotiation in reality television history? Healthy love is about mutual growth. It's about wanting the best for your partner, for them to be a whole and independent person. It's about support, not obligation. What we see between Jenny and Sumit is the opposite. Jenny seems to actively resist any growth from Sumit that might lead him to become more independent. His independence is a threat to her control. Her entire sense of security is predicated on his dependence on her and his feeling of obligation toward her. And Sumit's love for her seems inextricably linked with his guilt. He doesn't just love her. He feels responsible for her. That is a terrible and unsustainable foundation for any relationship. Let's speculate on their future. What happens if, against all odds, Sumit's parents finally accept Jenny? What happens when the visa issues are permanently resolved? What happens when the central conflict of their narrative is removed? A healthy couple would rejoice, but for a dynamic built on martyrdom manipulation, peace is a threat. Without an external enemy to unite them, without a crisis to solve, the internal flaws of the relationship would be laid bare. The manipulator would need to invent a new grievance, a new way to elicit guilt. The complaints would turn from, "Your parents are torturing me," to, "You don't look at me the way you used to," or "You didn't appreciate the dinner I made for you enough." The scale of the drama would shrink, but the dynamic would remain. The martyr must always have a cross to bear. And if the world stops providing one, they will build one themselves. The debt Sumit owes is eternal. It can never be repaid because if it were, she would lose her only source of power. This brings us to the final and most uncomfortable reckoning. It's not about them, it's about us. Why have we, the audience, so readily accepted the simple narrative of Jenny the victim? Is it because the story of an older woman sacrificing everything for a younger man is a powerful, almost mythological trope? Is it because we are conditioned by the media to see women in these situations as passive victims rather than as complex agents of their own lives, capable of the same manipulative tendencies as men? We have condemned Sumit for his obvious, clumsy manipulations, his lies, his secrets. But we have given Jenny a pass for her very more subtle, more psychologically sophisticated brand of control because it is cloaked in the language of pain and love. We have been duped, not just by Jenny, but by our own appetite for a simple story with a clear hero and a clear villain. The truth is far murkier and far more tragic. We are not watching a fairy tale romance. We are watching a slow-motion psychological case study of two broken people who found in each other the perfect way to avoid confronting their own demons. Sumit's cowardice allows Jenny's martyrdom to flourish, and Jenny's martyrdom gives Sumit's cowardice a noble purpose. It is a perfect, self-perpetuating toxic ecosystem. To absolve Jenny of all responsibility is to infantilize her. It is to say that she is nothing more than a passive object, a victim of circumstance. The truth is more complex. She is a survivor, and she has learned to survive by turning her greatest wound into her most effective weapon. She may have given up America for Sumit, but in exchange, she has taken ownership of his soul. Is she a victim or a master manipulator? The line is so blurred it may not exist at all. Perhaps she is both. Perhaps that is the true tragedy of their story. A great sacrifice can also be a great weapon. A great love can also be a great prison. This is a controversial take, I know. It challenges everything we thought we knew about this couple, and that is exactly why we need to discuss it. I want you to go back and watch their scenes with this new lens. Watch for the timing of her tears. Listen for the deployment of the sacrifice narrative. Watch Sumit's shoulders slump in guilt. The evidence is there. So let's have a respectful, intelligent debate in the comments. Is Jenny also to blame for this toxic mess? Is she a mastermind of emotional blackmail, or is she the ultimate tragic heroine of the 90-day universe, doing what she must to survive? Has this deep dive changed your perspective? I want to hear your theories, your evidence, your take on the American dream blackmail. Let me know below. For years, we've watched the saga of Jenny and Sumit unfold, a story that seemed to be pulled straight from a tragic romance novel. We've seen her tears, we've heard her voice break. A montage of her pain plays in the mind of every 90-day fan. "I gave up everything for you." The words echo, a constant refrain of her journey. "I left my whole family, my children, my grandchildren." We see her, isolated in a foreign land, her face etched with a familiar sorrow. "I have nothing back home. I sold everything. This is it." For years, we've seen her as the ultimate victim, the woman who sacrificed it all for love, a noble martyr in the face of a man who couldn't stand up to his family. We've sympathized, we've rooted for her, we've condemned Sumit for his cowardice. But what if that narrative, the one we've been fed for seasons, is only half the story? What if that sacrifice, that noble, heartbreaking act of devotion, has become her most powerful and most toxic weapon? If you're ready to look past the tears and see the masterclass in manipulation that might be hiding in plain sight, then prepare yourself. This is a deep dive that will change the way you see this couple forever. Before we pull back the curtain, do me a favor and hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. You are not going to want to miss the explosive evidence we are about to reveal, and we're just getting started. Let's begin by acknowledging the truth of Jenny's sacrifice. It was real. It was monumental. To leave your country, your family, your entire support system, and your financial security in your 60s for a man 30 years your junior in a country whose culture is largely alien to you is an act of breathtaking risk. It is an act of either profound love or profound desperation, and for a long time, we have all agreed to call it love. We have watched her navigate the labyrinth of Indian cultural expectations, the outright hostility of Sumit's parents, and the constant uncertainty of their legal status. Her pain has been palpable, her isolation undeniable. She truly did give up the world she knew. This fact is the bedrock of their entire story, the foundational truth upon which their relationship is built. And it is precisely because this truth is so powerful, so undeniably real, that it can be twisted into the most effective tool of control imaginable. To understand how this works, we have to stop looking at this as a simple love story and start analyzing it through the cold, hard lens of psychological dynamics. We consulted with a relationship psychologist, an expert in cross-cultural power dynamics and covert emotional manipulation, to analyze hours of footage, and what she identified was a clear and consistent pattern, a behavior she terms martyrdom manipulation. Martyrdom manipulation is a sophisticated and often subconscious form of emotional blackmail. It's not about overt threats or angry demands. It's far more insidious. It operates by creating a perpetual sense of indebtedness in one partner. The manipulator, or the martyr, performs a grand, undeniable sacrifice. This sacrifice then becomes a moral and emotional leverage point that can be used indefinitely to control the other person's behavior, stifle their needs, and win any and all future arguments. The debt can never be repaid because the sacrifice was too great. Every time the indebted partner tries to assert their own desires, express unhappiness, or set a boundary, the martyr doesn't need to argue the point. They simply need to remind their partner of the enormous unrepayable debt. The argument is over before it even begins. The partner is silenced by their own guilt. Now, let's apply this theory to Jenny and Sumit. The evidence is overwhelming, and it has been hiding in plain sight for years. The first and most crucial piece of evidence is the repetitive and strategic deployment of her sacrifice narrative. It is not something she mentions once in a while when she is feeling particularly low. It is her opening salvo, her closing argument, and her trump card in nearly every single conflict they have. Think about the timing. When does Jenny bring up the fact that she gave up everything? It is almost never during moments of peace and happiness. It is deployed like a strategic weapon at the precise moment Sumit shows a flicker of doubt, a hint of rebellion, or a desire for something that doesn't completely revolve around her. Let's look at the classic example. Sumit wanting to see his family. On the surface, this is a reasonable request for any man, especially one in a culture as family-centric as India. But in the dynamic of their relationship, it's a threat. It's a moment where his attention and loyalty are directed away from Jenny. And what is her immediate response? It's not, "Okay, honey, I understand, but it's hard for me." It's a full-scale deployment of the martyrdom narrative. Tears well up in her eyes. Her voice takes on that familiar, wounded tone. "I'm here all alone, Sumit. I have no one. I left my children for you. I left my grandchildren for you. And you want to go and spend time with people who hate me?" Let's break down what's happening here psychologically. She is not engaging with his need to see his family. She is reframing his need as a direct betrayal of her sacrifice. The subtext is crystal clear. How dare you even think about your own needs when I have annihilated mine for your sake? Your desire for your family is an insult to the family I abandoned for you. This instantly puts Sumit on the defensive. He is no longer a man trying to navigate a difficult family situation. He is now a villain, a thoughtless cretin who is actively hurting the woman who gave up the world for him. His guilt is triggered. His original desire to see his family is now overshadowed by the immediate need to placate Jenny, to soothe her pain, to reassure her of his love and loyalty. And so, he backs down. He cancels his plans, or he goes but is consumed with guilt, rushing back to her side. The manipulation is a success. Her control over his actions is reaffirmed not through a direct command, but through the crushing weight of his perceived obligation. This pattern repeats itself with terrifying consistency. Consider their financial situation. For a long time, Jenny was unable to work in India. She was financially dependent on Sumit. On the surface, she is the vulnerable one. But look at how this vulnerability is weaponized. Any discussion about money, about Sumit needing to work longer hours, or about their budget is often met with a variation of the same theme. I have nothing, Sumit. I sold my house. I used my savings to come here. I have no social security. I have nothing to go back to. Again, she is not discussing the financial issue at hand. She is reminding him of the financial abyss she leaped into for him. The unspoken message is that he owes her financial security for the rest of her life, no matter the cost to him. His stress about work, his exhaustion, his own financial fears, they are all rendered illegitimate in the face of her grand financial sacrifice. How can he complain about being tired when she is destitute without him? He can't. Guilt silences him. He must simply work harder, provide more, and never, ever complain, because he is forever in her debt. The theory of martyrdom manipulation posits that the manipulator often doesn't even see their own actions as manipulative. In their mind, they are simply speaking the truth. Jenny genuinely did give up everything. She genuinely is alone in India. She genuinely is financially vulnerable. From her perspective, she is merely reminding Sumit of the reality of their situation. But this is the genius of this particular brand of control. It cloaks itself in the language of victimhood and truth. A master manipulator of this type, our expert explains, is often the most convinced of their own story. They have so deeply internalized the role of the martyr that they see any action that doesn't serve their needs as an act of profound selfishness from the other party. They have sacrificed, so now it is their turn to receive, forever. The balance sheet of the relationship can never be leveled. Let's prove this theory with more concrete examples from their history on the show. Remember the explosive reveal of Sumit's secret marriage? This was, without a doubt, Sumit's original sin, a monstrous betrayal that is impossible to defend. He lied, he cheated, he catfished her. He deserved every ounce of her rage and heartbreak. But watch the aftermath closely. After the initial justified explosion of pain, Jenny's narrative quickly coalesced. Her focus wasn't just on the lie. It became about the futility of her sacrifice. I came all this way. I left my life for you, and you were married the whole time? The betrayal was bad, but the fact that it made her sacrifice look foolish was the ultimate injury. And from that moment forward, that betrayal became Exhibit A in the eternal courtroom of their relationship. It was proof that Sumit was untrustworthy and that she was the ultimate victim. This event, as horrible as it was, supercharged her martyrdom. It gave her the ultimate piece of evidence, a moral high ground from which she could never be dislodged. From that point on, any mistake Sumit made, any hesitation, any lie, was not just a new offense. It was seen as a continuation of that original betrayal, another slap in the face to the woman who gave up everything and was rewarded with a secret wife. This is a key element of the control. Past grievances are never allowed to die. They are kept alive and added to the mountain of debt that Sumit already owes her. When Sumit was fighting to get his divorce, a long and arduous process, was Jenny a supportive partner? Understanding the complexities of the Indian legal system? At times, yes. But at the first sign of a delay, at the first moment of doubt, what did we hear? I'm just waiting, Sumit. My visa is running out. I can't stay here forever. I gave everything up to be here, and you can't even get a divorce. The pressure was immense. His struggle was reframed as a personal failure to validate her sacrifice quickly enough. It wasn't about them as a team fighting an external problem. It was about him and his failure to repay his debt to her by solving the problem instantly. The theory is further proven when you analyze what happens when the tables are turned. When Jenny is the one who is arguably in the wrong. Think about the times she has been critical of Indian culture, when she's complained about the heat, the filth, or the customs. When Sumit or his family try to gently correct her or ask her to adapt, her defense mechanism is immediate. She retreats back into her victimhood. It's not that she's unwilling to adapt, it's that she's already done so much. I'm trying my best. This is all new to me. I'm so far from home. The conversation is shut down. She cannot be criticized because she is the martyr. Any criticism is seen as a lack of appreciation for the enormous sacrifice she has already made. It's a psychological get-out-of-jail-free card. She is exempt from the normal give and take of a relationship, the normal expectation that both partners must adapt and compromise because her initial give was so astronomically large. Let's examine the dynamic with Sumit's parents, Anil and Sana. For years, we have seen them as the primary villains of this story. And let's be clear, their behavior has often been cruel, controlling, and unacceptable. But through the lens of martyrdom manipulation, Jenny's role in this dynamic becomes far more active than we previously thought. She is not just a passive recipient of their scorn. She actively uses their disapproval as a tool to further isolate Sumit and bind him closer to her. After every confrontation with his parents, after every tearful fight and dramatic threat, Jenny doesn't encourage Sumit to find a middle ground or to work on a long-term solution. Instead, she presents him with a stark binary choice. It's them or me. And she reinforces this choice by, you guessed it, reminding him of her sacrifice. The scene plays out like a theatrical production. The parents leave after a screaming match. The air is thick with tension. Jenny turns to Sumit, her face a mask of sorrow. You see, Sumit? They will never accept me. They will never love me. I am all alone here, with no one but you. I did all of this for you. Are you going to choose them, or are you going to choose the woman who gave up her entire world for you? This is not the talk of a partner. This is the closing argument of a prosecutor. She presents herself as the sole source of love and acceptance in his life, and frames his family as the source of all their pain. By doing this, she leverages his parents' cruelty to her advantage. The worse they treat her, the more potent her weapon becomes. Every insult from Sana is another stone in the wall she builds around Sumit, a wall that separates him from his entire past, his culture, and his family. His parents' actions make him feel guilty, and Jenny's manipulation capitalizes on that guilt, redirecting it into a feeling of obligation towards her. He is trapped in a pincer movement of guilt, caught between the demands of his parents and the emotional debt he owes his partner. Insider reports from the production crew have often hinted at this dynamic being even more pronounced off-camera. They speak of a constant atmosphere of emotional fragility, where any small disagreement could trigger the "I gave it all up" monologue, effectively shutting down communication. One source allegedly reported that during a simple discussion about what to have for dinner, Sumit expressed a desire for a traditional dish his mother used to make. Jenny's mood reportedly soured instantly, and she replied with, "Well, I'm sorry I can't cook like your mother. I guess nothing I do will ever be good enough for you, even after I cross the world to be here." A simple food preference was instantly escalated into a referendum on her entire sacrifice. This is not a healthy relationship. This is a hostage situation, where the hostage taker is convinced they are the victim. This brings us to the core of the theory, the idea that Jenny is not a passive player in a toxic dynamic, but an active and highly skilled participant. Her narrative, the "I gave up everything" story, is her primary tool of control. It's a guilt trip so powerful, so deeply rooted in a genuine, tangible sacrifice, that it effectively silences Sumit's own unhappiness. It prevents him from ever truly expressing his own needs, fears, or doubts without appearing to be a monster of ingratitude. She holds her own sacrifice over his head like an eternal, unpayable mortgage on his soul. He is not in this relationship just out of love. He is in it out of a crushing sense of obligation, a feeling that he owes her a happy ending to justify the destruction of her previous life. Think about the sheer weight of that obligation. A man in his 30s, who has already shown himself to be prone to lying and avoiding conflict, is now emotionally responsible for the entire happiness of a woman in her 60s who constantly reminds him that he is her last and only hope. He cannot fail. He cannot have doubts. He cannot leave, because if he does, he is not just breaking up with a girlfriend. In the narrative Jenny has so carefully constructed, he would be invalidating her entire life's biggest decision. He would be proving his parents right. He would be turning her grand romantic sacrifice into a pathetic, tragic mistake. The pressure is unimaginable. It's a form of control far more potent than his parents' overt threats, because it comes from the person who is supposed to be his sanctuary. Let's dig deeper into the nuance of how this manipulation is tailored to exploit Sumit's specific weaknesses. Sumit is, by his own admission, a people pleaser. He is desperate for the approval of his parents, and he is equally desperate to make Jenny happy. He is terrified of confrontation. This personality type is the absolute perfect target for martyrdom manipulation. A stronger, more assertive man might have called her out on this behavior years ago. He might have said, "Yes, you sacrificed a lot, and I appreciate it, but that does not give you the right to control my life. Hold it over my head and use it to win every argument. We are partners." not debtors, and a creditor. But Sumit is incapable of this. He is psychologically checked. Jenny's tears and reminders of her sacrifice are like a kryptonite to his conflict-avoidant nature. It is easier for him to lie, to sneak around, to placate, and to fold than it is to face the emotional tidal wave that would come from directly confronting the core of her manipulation. He knows that if he pushes back, he will be accused of not loving her, of not appreciating her, of being just like his parents, so he remains trapped, smiling a strained smile while the emotional prison walls close in around him. The weaponization of her age and cultural ignorance is another subtle but crucial layer to this. Jenny frequently portrays herself as a helpless, naive American abroad. I don't understand these customs. I can't speak the language. I'm an old woman. I can't do this. On one level, these are all valid concerns, but watch how they are used. They become another reason why Sumit must cater to her every need and protect her from any and all discomfort. Her perceived helplessness becomes his responsibility. He must not only be her lover and partner, but also her translator, her cultural guide, her financial provider, and her sole emotional support. She has created a dynamic of total dependence, which paradoxically gives her total control. By being helpless, she ensures that Sumit's entire life must revolve around managing her well-being. His own ambitions, friendships, and family connections must all take a back seat, because the helpless woman he imported from America needs his constant, undivided attention. This is not to absolve Sumit of his own massive failings. His initial catfishing and secret marriage were unforgivable acts of cowardice and deceit. He has lied to Jenny and his parents repeatedly. He is a man who has consistently chosen the path of least resistance, with disastrous consequences. But what this theory proposes is that the dynamic is not as simple as good guy versus bad guy, or victim versus villain. It suggests a far more complex and tragic reality, that we are watching two deeply flawed individuals locked in a toxic dance of codependent manipulation. Sumit trapped Jenny with his lies, and in turn, Jenny trapped Sumit with her sacrifice. He may have forged the initial bars of their prison with his deceit, but she has been reinforcing them ever since with the unbreakable steel of guilt. The reckoning here is not for them, but for us, the audience. We have been conditioned to see this story through a very specific lens, one that paints Jenny as a saintly victim. But this perspective is frankly lazy. It robs both of them of their agency and their complexity. It ignores the subtle but relentless emotional pressure she exerts on him. To truly understand this relationship, we have to be willing to hold two contradictory ideas in our heads at the same time. Sumit is a liar and a coward who has caused immense pain. And Jenny may be a master of emotional blackmail who has expertly used her own very real suffering to control him just as surely as his parents do. The control and manipulation in this relationship flow in both directions, creating a perfectly balanced, perfectly toxic system. His parents use overt, aggressive control, threats of disownment, shouting matches, emotional outbursts. Jenny, on the other hand, uses covert, passive-aggressive control, tears, reminders of her sacrifice, and the triggering of profound guilt. Sumit is caught in the middle, a man without the courage to escape either form of manipulation. He placates his parents with half-promises and avoids them when he can. He placates Jenny by surrendering his own autonomy and catering to the narrative that he owes her an unpayable debt. He is not a man living a life of his own choosing. He is a man constantly servicing the emotional debts he has accrued with both his family and his partner. We must ask ourselves the difficult questions. Is a great sacrifice, made in the name of love, still noble if it is then used as a weapon for the rest of a person's life? Can you truly be a victim if you are simultaneously using your victimhood to exert control over someone else? The line is incredibly blurred. It's possible that Jenny's actions are not even consciously malicious. They may be a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, born out of her genuine fear and isolation. Having given up everything, her subconscious might be forcing her to wield the only thing she has left, the moral authority of her sacrifice, to ensure she is never abandoned. But intention does not negate impact. Whether she means to or not, the result is the same. A relationship built not on a foundation of mutual respect and freedom, but on a toxic bedrock of debt, guilt, and obligation. This reframing doesn't make Sumit a hero. It simply makes Jenny a more complex and perhaps a more tragic figure. Not just a woman who is wronged, but a woman who has learned to use that wrong to trap the man she loves in a prison of his own making. Let's delve deeper, beyond the surface-level patterns and into the very fabric of their most iconic and revealing moments on screen. Because it's in these high-stakes confrontations and seemingly mundane interactions that the machinery of this manipulation is most clearly visible. Consider the period when Sumit's parents, Anil and Sana, actually moved in with them. This was framed as a last-ditch effort by Sana to teach Jenny how to be a proper Indian wife, but it was, in reality, a strategic invasion. On the surface, Jenny's misery was completely understandable. Who would want their hostile in-laws living with them, scrutinizing their every move? We saw her frustration, her complaints about the lack of privacy, the constant cleaning, the cultural clashes in the kitchen. We sympathized. We saw her as the victim of an impossible situation. But if we apply the lens of martyrdom manipulation, her reaction takes on a much more strategic dimension. Her panic wasn't just about the inconvenience, it was about a catastrophic loss of control. For years, Jenny's power over Sumit was amplified by their isolation. In their bubble, she was the sun around which his world revolved. Her needs, her happiness, her sacrifices, these were the central facts of his existence. But the moment his parents entered that home, her power was diluted. Suddenly, there was another powerful emotional force competing for his attention, his loyalty, and his guilt. Sana, his mother, is a master of a different, more overt kind of emotional manipulation. By moving in, she was reasserting her primary claim on her son. Jenny's reaction, her constant complaints and misery, wasn't just a natural response to a stressful situation. It was a desperate campaign to make Sumit's life so unbearable that he would be forced to choose. Every complaint about the state of the kitchen wasn't just about a dirty counter. It was a coded message. Your mother's presence is destroying the sanctuary I sacrificed everything for. You must remove her. You owe me a peaceful home. Every tearful confession to the camera about her misery was a broadcast to Sumit, a reminder that his failure to manage his parents was a direct betrayal of her. She was actively weaponizing her unhappiness to force him to expel the rival power from their home. And ultimately, it worked. The situation became so toxic that the parents had to leave. Jenny's control over their shared environment, and thus over Sumit, was restored.